At my daughter's engagement, she said, "Dad, we need to talk." I had heard those words from my daughter Millie before, but never with the look she gave me that evening. It was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of our family's life. The house was filled with relatives. Soft music, laughter, flowers, and the sound of people congratulating Millie on her engagement. She was standing beside her fiancé Ethan, smiling for photographs while my wife Dana moved from one guest to another, making sure everything was perfect. My son Robert Dolan had even taken time away from work to help with the arrangements. I remember looking around the room and thinking how quickly my children had grown. It seemed like yesterday that Millie had been running through our backyard with her hair tied in 2 little ribbons. Now she was an adult, preparing to start a new chapter of her life. I was proud of her. I was happy for her, and I believed nothing could spoil that evening. Then Millie walked toward me. She didn't smile this time. She gently touched my arm and said, "Dad, we need to talk." I immediately knew something was wrong. I asked her, "Is everything okay?" She looked toward Ethan, then toward her mother, and finally back at me. "Not here," she whispered. "Can we go somewhere private?" I followed her into my study and closed the door. She stood there silently for several seconds. I could see that she was struggling to find the right words. I told her, "Millie, whatever it is, you can tell me." She looked down at the floor. "I don't know how to say this without hurting you." I felt my heart sink. I asked whether something had happened with Ethan. She shook her head. "It's not that simple." I asked if she still wanted to marry him. She didn't answer immediately. That silence frightened me more than any words could have. Finally, she said, "Dad, I found something." I asked what she had found. She pulled a small envelope from her handbag and placed it on my desk. "I found this among Mom's old things." I stared at the envelope. My name was written on the front. The handwriting looked familiar, but I couldn't immediately place it. I asked Dana about it, but Millie stopped me. "Mom doesn't know I have it." I looked at my daughter in disbelief. "Then why did you bring it to me tonight?" Millie took a deep breath. "Because I think whatever is inside this envelope could change everything we believe about our family." She opened it slowly and pulled out a photograph. The moment I saw the people standing in that picture, I felt the room become strangely quiet. One of them was someone I had not seen in more than 20 years. And beside him stood my wife, Dana. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. I picked up the photograph and studied it carefully. Dana was much younger in the picture, perhaps in her late 20s. Beside her stood a man named Victor. I remembered him immediately. Victor had been a friend of mine before. My life took a completely different direction. We had worked together briefly, but our friendship ended after a disagreement that I never fully understood. I had not seen him since. I looked at Millie and asked, "Where did you find this?" She said she had discovered it inside an old box belonging to Dana, while helping her mother organize some things. There were letters too, she said. I read one because I thought it might explain the photograph. I asked what the letter said. Millie hesitated before answering. "It mentioned you." My stomach tightened. She handed me another piece of paper. It was old and slightly damaged, but several words were still clear. The letter talked about a decision Dana had made years ago. It also mentioned Victor. I read it twice, but I still couldn't understand the full story. I asked Millie whether she had shown the letter to Robert. She shook her head. "No, I came to you first." I asked why she hadn't simply asked Dana. She said, "Because I think Mom has been carrying this secret for years, and I don't know whether she's ready to tell us." I looked at the engagement party happening outside the study. People were laughing. Ethan was talking with Robert. Dinah was greeting relatives. Everything looked normal, but suddenly I felt as if I were looking at my own family through a window. I asked Millie what she thought the secret was. She said, "I don't know, but there's more." She took out several photocopies. They were records from a small town where Dana and I had lived before we married. One name appeared repeatedly beside Dana's, Victor. I asked why. Millie had investigated this much. She said she hadn't planned to. She had found the photograph by accident. But when she noticed Victor's name, she became curious. She searched through old records and found references to a business partnership between Victor and Dana. I felt confused. Dana had always told me that she barely knew Victor. Yet the record suggested they had been connected professionally. I asked Millie whether she knew why they had worked together. She said she didn't. Then she looked at me and asked, "Dad, do you remember when you and Mom first got married?" I smiled sadly. "Of course I remember." She said, Did Mom ever tell you about the year before your wedding? I shook my head. Not really. Millie lowered her voice. That's the part that scares me. Before I could ask another question, there was a knock on the study door. It was Dana. She opened it slightly and looked at us. The moment she saw the photograph in my hand, her face changed completely. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her. She stared at Millie and whispered, "Where did you get that?" Millie stood up. "From your things." Dana looked at me. I asked her the question that had been waiting in my mind. "Dana, who is Victor to you?" She closed her eyes for a moment. Then she said, "Daniel, I was hoping you would never have to ask me that." I felt as though the air had disappeared from the room. Dana sat down slowly. Millie remained standing beside the desk. I asked my wife again, "Who is Victor?" She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "He was someone I knew before you." I told her that I already knew that much. What I wanted to understand was why she had hidden the relationship from me for so many years. Dana explained that Victor had been involved in a small business she helped manage before we married. At that time, she had been struggling financially and had accepted his offer to help her. Their professional relationship became complicated, but she insisted there had never been a romantic relationship between them. I believed her, but I still wanted to know why the old letters existed. Dana admitted that Victor had once asked her to keep something confidential. She refused to tell me exactly what it was. I asked whether it involved my family. She shook her head. "Not directly." Millie interrupted. "Mom, that's not everything." Dana looked at her daughter. Millie told her she had found another letter hidden behind the photograph. She handed it to Dana. My wife read it and her hands began shaking. I asked what it said. Dana finally admitted that Victor had once been involved in a dispute with my father. I was stunned. My father had died years earlier, and I had never heard Victor's name connected to him. Dana explained that before we married, Victor had claimed my father owed him money. He had pressured Dana to convince me to help settle the dispute. But she refused because she believed Victor was exaggerating the situation. Instead, she distanced herself from him. I asked why she never told me. She said she was afraid I would confront Victor and create problems before our marriage even began. I thought the past was over, she said. I wanted to build a life with you. I understood her fear, but there was still something bothering me. I pointed to the photograph. Then why keep this? Dana said she had forgotten about it until recently. Millie looked at her mother and asked, "Then why was Victor's name in your old financial records?" Dana became silent. I realized there was still another piece missing. She eventually explained that years later, Victor had contacted her again. He told her that he had proof my father had taken money from him. Dana refused to believe him. She secretly investigated the claim and discovered that Victor's records had been altered. She realized he had been trying to use our family connection to make money. She cut contact with him, but she never told me because she believed the matter was finished. I asked her whether Victor had contacted her recently. Dana looked away. That was enough to answer my question. Millie asked, "Mom, when?" Dana finally said, 3 weeks ago. I stood up. "Why didn't you tell me?" She said Victor had threatened to reveal the old story publicly at Millie's engagement party. He wanted Dana to admit that she had once helped him access information about my father's finances. Dana insisted she had never helped him financially, but then she said something that changed everything. "Daniel, Victor doesn't just want money. He wants the original document I gave your father." I asked Dana what document she was talking about. She explained that years before our marriage, she had discovered evidence that Victor had manipulated financial records connected to my father. She had made a copy of the evidence and given it to my father because she believed he needed to protect himself. My father had kept the original document somewhere, but after his death, Dana had never found out where it went. Victor believed I might have it. That explained why he had suddenly returned after all these years. He wasn't interested in the engagement itself. He wanted something connected to my family's past. I asked Dana whether Victor had threatened Millie. She shook her head. "Not directly, but he told me he would embarrass our family if I didn't cooperate." I looked at Millie and realized why she had been so worried. She hadn't wanted her engagement to become the center of an old family dispute. I asked her why she hadn't told Ethan. She said she didn't want him to think her family was hiding something from him. I told her she had to stop carrying the problem alone. Then Robert entered the study. He had noticed that something was wrong and wanted to know what was happening. We had no choice but to tell him. He listened quietly while Dana explained the situation. When she finished, Robert said, "So, someone is threatening our family because of something Grandpa had?" I nodded. He asked whether the document was valuable. I said we didn't know. Robert thought for a moment and asked where my father's old belongings were kept. I remembered an old storage cabinet in my garage. My father had left several boxes there. We searched through them that night. Most contained ordinary family records, photographs, and old letters. Then Millie found a locked wooden box. The key was taped underneath an old photograph of my parents. Inside the box was a folder. My heart began beating faster. The folder contained financial papers, old receipts, and a sealed envelope. On the envelope was my father's handwriting. It said, "Daniel, only open this when you need to know the truth." I couldn't believe it. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a letter explaining that my father had suspected Victor of manipulating business records. He had written that Dana had warned him about Victor before our marriage. He also wrote that he had refused to give Victor money because he believed the demand was fraudulent. But there was one final page. It contained a copy of the original document Victor wanted. I realized why. Victor had been searching for it. The document showed that Victor had altered financial records to make another person appear responsible for a missing amount of money. It also proved that my father had not been involved. Robert looked at me and said, "Dad, we need to protect this." I agreed. We made copies and stored them securely. But before we could decide what to do next, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered. A man's voice said, "Daniel, now you know why your wife kept quiet." I asked who he was. He replied, "You have something that belongs to me." I told him he was wrong. He laughed and said, "Then let's see what happens at your daughter's engagement." The call ended. Millie looked at me. "Dad, what does he mean?" I looked at my family and knew we could no longer pretend this was only an old secret. Someone was actively trying to pressure us. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer and explained everything we had discovered. I didn't want our family making decisions based on anger. We needed to handle the situation properly. The lawyer examined the documents and told us that the evidence could be important, but we needed to preserve the originals and avoid confronting Victor directly. I agreed. Dana felt guilty because she believed the entire situation had started because of her decision. Years ago, I told her that she had made mistakes, but she had also tried to protect our family. Millie reminded her that she didn't have to carry the blame alone. For the first time, Dinah openly told us everything she remembered about Victor. She explained that he had once been charming and persuasive, but he became controlling when people refused to cooperate with him. She had realized that something was wrong when she noticed that numbers in several financial records didn't match. She had copied the records and shown them to my father. He had immediately understood the danger. I was amazed that my father had kept this secret from me for so many years. But when I read his letter again, I realized why. He wanted me to live my life without being dragged into an old dispute. He had believed the matter would eventually disappear. Unfortunately, it hadn't. Victor contacted us again 2 days later. This time, he didn't threaten us. He invited us to meet him. I refused. The lawyer advised us to let the proper authorities handle communication. We followed that advice. Victor eventually learned that we had preserved the documents. His attitude changed. He started claiming that the papers were fake, but the evidence was supported by other records. Dana told me she wished she had spoken sooner. I told her that the important thing was that she was finally speaking now. Eventually, the investigation uncovered evidence supporting Dinah's account. Victor had manipulated records and had tried to use old information to pressure several people. The original document my father had preserved became an important part of the case. Victor could no longer claim that everything was a misunderstanding. The legal process continued, and our family stayed out of unnecessary confrontation. Millie's engagement party was no longer the event where we feared a public confrontation. It became the place where she and Ethan chose to move forward despite the past. On the evening of the party, Millie came to me and said, "Dad, we need to talk." This time I wasn't afraid of those words. I knew she wanted to tell me something important. She smiled and said, "I almost canceled everything." I asked why. She said, "Because I thought our family was too complicated for someone else to join." I took her hand and told her, "Every family has complicated chapters. The right people don't run from them. They help you turn the page." Millie hugged me. Then she whispered, "I think I'm ready." Millie returned to the engagement party with a different expression. The fear that had been on her face earlier was gone. She stood beside Ethan and introduced him to everyone as the man she had chosen to build her future with. I watched them together and realized that the secret we had spent weeks worrying about could never take away what mattered most. Dana stood beside me. She looked at Millie and smiled. "She's stronger than I realized," she said. I replied, "She's our daughter." Robert joined us and joked that we were becoming too emotional. We laughed. For the first time in weeks, our family felt normal again. The legal matter continued separately, but we refused to let it dominate our lives. Eventually, the investigation reached its conclusion. The evidence showed that Victor had attempted to manipulate financial records and pressure people into giving him money. The old accusations against my father were dismissed. My family name was cleared of the claims that had followed us for years. Victor faced the consequences of his actions through the proper process. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting, no revenge, just the truth finally being established. That was enough for me. A few months later, Millie and Ethan married. The wedding was smaller than the engagement party, but it felt more meaningful. Before the ceremony, Millie came to me and said, "Dad, do you remember the night I told you we needed to talk?" I smiled. "I remember." She said, "I was terrified that night." I told her I was too. She laughed and said, "I thought you were going to be angry." I admitted that I had been confused, but I was proud that she trusted me enough to tell me. She hugged me and said, "You taught me that family should talk when something is wrong." I looked at Dana. She smiled because we both understood the lesson. During the wedding ceremony, I watched Millie make her vows. I thought about the little girl she had once been and the woman standing in front of me. She had faced fear without allowing it to decide her future. After the ceremony, Robert gave a short speech. He talked about how families sometimes carry old stories that nobody wants to discuss. He said the best families aren't those without secrets or mistakes. They're the ones willing to face the truth when it becomes necessary. Dinah cried through most of his speech. I teased her afterward and she laughed. Later that evening, she and I sat outside while the guests danced. She apologized again for keeping Victor's return from me. I told her, "Dana, I understand now. You were scared, but next time don't protect me from the truth. Stand beside me while we face it." She nodded. "I promise." We sat quietly for a while. Then she said, "Do you think your father knew this would all come out one day?" I looked at the old photograph of him that I carried in my wallet. Maybe. Or maybe he simply hoped we'd find the truth when we were ready. Dana took my hand. "I think Millie was ready before all of us." I smiled. She was right. My daughter had walked into that engagement party carrying a secret she believed could destroy our family. Instead, she gave us the chance to finally understand our past and choose our future. But there was one final thing I wanted to do. I took Millie's engagement photograph, turned it over, and wrote a message on the back for her. "Never be afraid to talk to your father." Then I gave it to her. Millie read the message and hugged me tightly. She told me that the night she said, "Dad, we need to talk," she had been afraid I would see her as a problem instead of my daughter. I told her that could never happen. Problems come and go, but family remains. She smiled and said, "That's why I came to you." Those words meant more to me than she probably realized. Looking back, I understand that the real story wasn't about Victor, the old documents or the financial dispute. Those things were only the events that brought our family to a turning point. The real story was about trust. For years, Dana had believed that silence could protect us. Millie had believed she needed to solve the problem before bringing it to me. I had believed that being a father meant protecting my children from every difficult truth. We were all wrong in different ways. Protection without honesty can create distance. Love without communication can leave people feeling alone. And family without trust can become a collection of people, keeping secrets from one another, while believing they are doing the right thing. The engagement night changed that for us. After everything was settled, Dana and I started having long conversations about our past. There were things she had never told me, not because she wanted to deceive me, but because she had been afraid of reopening old wounds. I told her that I didn't need a perfect history. I only needed the truth. She told me she felt the same. Robert and Millie also became more open with us. They stopped hiding their worries because they knew we would listen. Sometimes they still disagreed with our advice, and that was fine. I learned that listening doesn't always mean giving someone the answer they want. Sometimes it simply means letting them know they don't have to face a difficult decision alone. A year after Millie's wedding, We returned to the place where she had held her engagement party. It was quieter that day. We stood outside and remembered everything that had happened. Millie laughed when she remembered how nervous she had been before talking to me. Robert joked about how confused he had been when he first walked into the study. Dana admitted she had thought everything was going to fall apart. I told them that, in a strange way, everything had actually come together. We had confronted an old problem, cleared my father's name, and learned how to communicate better. Before we left, Millie hugged me and said, "Dad, I'm glad I talked to you." I told her, "I'm glad you did too." Then she smiled and said, "Even though it caused all that trouble?" I laughed. Especially because of that, sometimes the conversations we fear the most are the ones that change our lives. Sometimes a single sentence can open a door to a truth that has been waiting for years. My daughter came to me that evening believing she was about to tell me something that would destroy our family. Instead, she gave us an opportunity to become stronger. And I learned something I wish I had understood much earlier. When someone you love says, "We need to talk," don't immediately fear the worst. Sit down, listen, let them speak. Because sometimes they're not bringing you a problem. Sometimes they're giving you a chance to help them carry it. I still keep that old photograph from Millie's engagement party. On the back is the message I wrote for her. Never be afraid to talk to your father. Every time I see it, I remember the night everything changed. And I remember that the strongest families aren't the ones that never face secrets, mistakes, or difficult moments. They're the ones that choose to face them together. If you like this video, respond us by comment. Tell your places where you are looking from it. Make me happy to see people from different places. And don't forget to subscribe channel for more videos.